The Lions-Rams playoff matchup is supposed to be one of the best ones that we've seen in a very long time. But one of the best things about playoff games like this is the matchups that are happening on the field. And we're going to talk about it in today's episode, folks, so stay tuned. We used to be a team no one respected. We used to be a team no one feared. That was then. This is now.
First victory of the year on the line. Goff's got it. Back, looks, throws, end zone. Yes! Caught!
You know who we are.
10, 5, end zone. Touchdown, Detroit Lions.
And you know where to find us. We won't be far. We'll be on your front porch waiting for you. We are the New Era Lions. And
we are driven by Detroit.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and with that, we're diving in right now. But before we dive in, again, I just want to say to those that are returning to my show, thank you all for coming back. Thank you all for your view, your support, your patronage. It absolutely means the world to me, and I'm ever so thankful for all my loyal viewers and subscribers. And to those that are tuning into my show for the very, very first time, I just want to say, again, thank you all for tuning into this show. I hope you'll enjoy the content, but even more so, I hope to gain you all subscribers if I've earned and deserved it. And with that, to everybody, I just want to say, God bless. I hope you're all having a great day. And with that, let's dive into the show. So here's the thing, folks. When you take a look at playoff games, when you take a look at this particular playoff game, there are going to be matchups that are going to decide what happens in this game as far as victory. Like, sometimes, as the saying goes, this is a game of inches. And sometimes all it's going to take is one matchup potentially going the way you want it to go, and that's going to be your deciding factor. Like, some people want to say, oh, well, you know, it could be this, it could be that. There's a lot of things that could go into potentially how a team wins or loses on any given Sunday. But when you're talking about a playoff game of this magnitude, of this important, it's going to be like, listen, there's going to be multiple things, multiple matchups that I think are really going to help decide the factor of who wins this game. Because again, I take a look at this game between the Lions and the Rams. This is a really good matchup, regardless of anything else being said about people saying it's a setup by the NFL, which I personally do think to a certain degree that, yeah, this has definitely been scripted. I mean, between what happened in the Dallas game, between the fact that, you know, hey, the Rams have won 7 out of their last 8 to kind of get them in this spot, it's like, yeah, this definitely has that kind of air and feeling to it. But all things aside, it's like, listen, this is a pretty good matchup between both of these teams because their strengths and their weaknesses kind of go hand in hand. So that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. We're going to talk about what matchups I personally think are really going to hold a huge amount of sway over whether or not any team gets a victory in this game. So let's talk about those matchups. The first matchup I can honestly think of that's going to hold a lot of sway is how Ben Johnson versus Raheem Morris shapes out, because you got to think about this here. Ben Johnson and Raheem Morris are both considered guys that are going to be top names for these head coaching vacancies that we've now got this offseason. And let's be fair and honest here, there's a lot of vacancies that have already kind of popped up over from when we first started, because you got to think about it. The Panthers have got a vacancy. The Raiders have a vacancy. Chargers, Falcons, Titans just fired their head coach. I mean, you think about it, same thing with the Commanders. There's a lot of vacancies that are opening up, and names like Morris and Johnson are definitely popping up into those cycles, like people that are asking, hey, we want to request an interview so that way these guys can potentially be seen as, hey, you might be a head coaching candidate. You might be a head coach here very shortly. So that's first and foremost something to consider. But then you got to consider how these two guys also kind of face each other out on the field. Ben Johnson is considered one of, if not the best offensive coordinator, best young offensive mind coming up through the ranks in the NFL. Raheem Morris is considered a really, really good defensive mind. Because you got to think about it here. Ben Johnson over the last 2 years has led the Detroit Lions offense, along with Jared Goff, to 2 straight top 5 finishes. Morris, on the other hand, has done a very good job of making this Rams defense, which, let's be fair and honest, it's a shell of what it used to be, and I'm specifically referring to back in 2021 when it had freaking Von Miller, it had Eric Weddle, it had freaking Jalen Ramsey, it had Leonard Floyd, it had all these really, really big pieces, but the only piece that still remains from that 2021 season that's of very high prominence is Aaron Donald. So Raheem Morris has done a very, very good job of making this defense at least modest to average with only having one huge centerpiece and having a bunch of other guys that most people wouldn't consider full-time starters. So it's like, listen, that is a really great testament to Morris. So it's like, listen, with all that personnel turnover, he's still done a great job with that defense. So when you think about how these two have been doing in their own personal jobs and then what they've got at stake on the line outside of this game, there's going to be a massive amount of time that's going to be spent between these two individuals that is going to be game planning. Pardon me, I'm tripping over my tongue a little bit there. They're going to be game planning to exploit whatever potential weaknesses the other unit has. So then it's going to come up to, okay, who does a better job at game planning and play calling, number one? But then it also then says, okay, here, you go from that one particular matchup, and then you start looking at the other matchups that are kind of inside that particular one. And that's going to kind of springboard us into the rest of this episode. So, okay, Ben Johnson versus Raheem Morris, there's that matchup. This is one matchup I can already tell you a lot of Lions fans are kind of looking forward to. Penei Sewell versus Aaron Donald. And the reason why is because, again, let's go back to 2021. Penei Sewell's rookie year. You go back to Penei Sewell's rookie year in the game that we traveled to LA to play the Rams at SoFi. Penei Sewell and Aaron Donald, they kind of got into it briefly on the field because Sewell was like, listen, I don't care who Aaron Donald is. I'm not going to back down to this man. And that kind of was like one of the most defining plays of him for 2021. And I'm talking about Penei Sewell. Now here we are 2 years removed from that, and Penei Sewell has easily become one of, if not the top 5 kind of tackles that's in the league. Because, like, listen, Penei Sewell can play both left and right tackle, and he plays both exceedingly well. So it's like, listen, you can say Penei Sewell's top 3, top 5 tackle in the NFL, regardless of whatever side of the ball he's playing on, either left side or right side. And then you've got Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald, by some people's standards, is considered the best defensive lineman of all time because of just his sheer ability to be disruptive as a one-man wrecking crew. And it's like, okay, you've got Penei Sewell, who is this young, really great potential all-pro tackle. Then you've got Aaron Donald, who is an all-pro great, Hall of Fame great defensive tackle, defensive end, that is still a dominating force that's going to affect offenses, and he still does. So it's like, listen, that's going to be a huge matchup because you got to think about it here. Aaron Donald is the best player that the Rams have, not only on the entire defense, but on their defensive line. So it's going to be very crucial for us to pay attention to how he and Sewell match up because Sewell plays a huge part in how that line works because it's like, listen, he does a great job in pass pro, but his best quality is what he does in run protection. And the run game is extremely crucial to how the Lions offense vibes. It's how it runs itself. So it's like, listen, if Penei Sewell can at least hold his own or show that he's gotten way more better than what he was as a rookie against Aaron Donald, I think that's going to show if the Lions can actually control the game against the Rams, which will allow them to rest their defense for periods of time, and it will keep Stafford off the field to help increase the Lions' chances of victory. So there's that matchup that plays a huge part to what happens during this game. Then let's take a look at this matchup. Let's take a look at what this potential one can do. And actually, this one kind of cuts both ways in a sense. And you'll see what I mean here in a moment. The Rams secondary versus Amon-Ra St. Brown and company. Because you got to think about it here. I did a video talking about this not that long ago. I'll put that episode back up at the top. But it's like, listen, neither the Rams nor the Lions' defensive secondaries are all particularly that good against the pass. They're kind of a bit on the weak side, especially the Lions. But when you take a look at the Rams secondary, it's like, listen, who's the best player for the Rams in that secondary? To me, it's honestly Ahkello Witherspoon. He's the best player they've got in their secondary. And Witherspoon is having a pretty decent year for the Rams. He's done a good job. But I'll say this, he ain't no Jalen Ramsey. He ain't no Eric Weddle. He ain't no Aqib Talib. Those are all guys that the Rams have had over the last couple of years that I would say are quite substantially better than Witherspoon. But Witherspoon's the best player that the Rams have in that secondary. Well, that's great and all, but take a look at what the Lions have on their side of the offensive ball for weapons. You've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, who got over 1,500 yards receiving this year. You've got Jamison Williams, who's going to be making his playoff debut because he wasn't able to play in the Vikings game because of that ankle injury and because of illness, but Dan Campbell has already said he's good to go. You're going to have Josh Reynolds, and the way I'm looking at it, there's a pretty decent chance that Sam Laporta is going to be able to play because it's like, listen, if Campbell says there's an outside chance he's going to play, it's like, listen, he's a rookie, he's young, this is his first chance to play in the playoffs. I guarantee you he's going to do everything he can to play. And it's like, listen, if Campbell says there's a chance he's going to play, it's just going to matter on where he is in 48 hours. I think what it's then going to come down to is, can he tolerate pain? Can he tolerate the pain if he has to play in this game? But again, we're going to see what happens. I'm not too worried about Laporta, but I think he plays. So when you consider all those weapons, Jamo, Reynolds, Laporta, St. Brown, then you've also got Gibbs and Montgomery out of the backfield. You've also got other guys that are smaller role players like James Mitchell and Brock Wright that can also catch the rock. It's like, listen, the Rams have seldom faced a team that has that much receiving talent. Not necessarily talent on offense, but receiving talent. There's a ton of weapons that Jared Goff can exploit in that Rams secondary, and it's like, listen, I don't know if the Rams secondary has really had to face a game where it's like, listen, you have that many guys that you have to account for on any given play to potentially catch passes. Because it's like, listen, okay, those are your primary weapons for the Lions, right? What about Penei Sewell and also Dan Skipper and also Taylor Decker, who can come out of the backfield or off of the line of scrimmage and do things to also screw with you? So again, the Rams secondary being able to stop the Lions' weapons and Jared Goff, that's going to be another crucial matchup in my opinion. Then you kind of flip it on the opposite side of here. Like I was saying, the Lions secondary versus what the Rams have in terms of weapons, especially receiving weapons. And that particularly comes with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Because it's like, listen, that matchup I think might be the second or the most what's the word I'm looking for here? Deciding factor that the Lions and Rams are going to have. I think that one might just make or break who wins this game in the terms of the Rams and the Lions. Because it's like, listen, the Lions have not been very good at all this year in pass coverage, and they've not been very good against wide receivers, especially over the last 3 or so weeks. So it's like, listen, you have Matthew Stafford, who in Detroit was known as Matthew Statford. You've got Cooper Kupp, who's a Triple Crown winner in the NFL. You've got Nacua, who just set the record for both NFL rookies in receptions and receiving yards. It's like, listen, you've got these guys coming into Detroit, and it's like, listen, this defensive secondary for the Lions is going to have to step up immensely. Now, to be fair, we've gone against guys over the last 2 weeks in Jefferson and Lamb, but let's understand something here. In the first two matchups of 1, Jefferson, and 2, Lamb, because the third one, a little bit different, we did not have C.J. Gardner-Johnson or C.D. Deuce playing in that game. We also did not have a Lee McNeil playing in that game. So it's like, listen, we just got those guys back last week. They're kind of reintroducing themselves to the team. So it's like, listen, the Lions defense has definitely gotten reinforcements that's definitely going to help them in this game. The real question is whether or not it's going to be enough time for them to really step up and to really help this defense to stop potentially Stafford, Kupp, and Nacua. But the real thing about the Lions is the one thing they have done really well over the last couple of weeks is being very opportunistic with turnovers. Virtually every single week the last 3 or 4 weeks, they have been getting at least 1 or 2 turnovers that has really helped them out. If you go back to the Vikings game, they had two interceptions of Nick Mullins. You go back to the Cowboys game, they had a turnover from Dak Prescott and also from CeeDee Lamb. Then you go to the Vikings game before that, they had 4 interceptions of Nick Mullins. So it's like, listen, this Lions defense as of late has been very, very opportunistic in getting turnovers, and that's something they're really going to have to do in this game against the Rams if they want to limit their passing game effectiveness. So there's those matchups of the Rams secondary and Lions secondary against both teams' passing games, I would say, just to kind of simplify it. Then we get back, we got one more matchup within the matchup. Then we get to this matchup. Byron Young versus Taylor Decker. Now, some Lions fans are going to be like, who the hell is Byron Young? Byron Young is a rookie pass rusher, outside linebacker, kind of edge rusher that has really done a good job for the Rams this year. He's got 8 sacks. He's done a really good job along with another defensive tackle, like nose tackle for the Rams, because if you take a look at who I'm referring to, Donald has 8 sacks, the nose tackle has 9 sacks, and this guy, Byron Young, has also 8 sacks. So all 3 of these guys have done a very consistent job, very good consistent job of providing pressure on quarterbacks. Well, Byron Young is most likely going to be lining outside, which is going to most likely put him in competition directly with Taylor Decker on quite a few plays. Well, here's the thing. Much like how Donald versus Sewell is going to have a big impact on the Lions' running game in particular, this one I think is going to have an impact on the Lions' passing game, because it's like, listen, what's Taylor Decker? He's the left tackle. He's the blindside tackle for Jared Goff in this Lions offense. Byron Young has been doing a pretty good job this year as a pass rusher, so it's like, listen, Decker is going to have to step up, and he's going to have to try to find his way to handle this youngster and have to be like, okay, how do I stop this guy? Now, granted, it's not like he's going up against guys like Micah Parsons, Danielle Hunter, and all these other guys, but at the same time, it's like, listen, Byron Young's going to be full of energy. He's going to be trying to attack Taylor Decker to get to Jared Goff. So what Decker is going to have to do is he's going to have to rely on all of his experience to try and stop this guy, so that way he gives Jared Goff plenty of time in the pocket, plus also all his other responsibilities in run protection, so on and so forth. But again, this is another little matchup that I think some people probably aren't thinking about because most people don't know who Byron Young is. But again, I try to keep as much information as I can on another team as much as possible, so that way I know what to expect potentially on any given game. So, that talks about those matchups with inside of, Ben Johnson versus Raheem Morris. Now we're going to kind of step back out to the larger picture here really quickly. This is probably the other big one as far as a bigger picture that I think a lot of Lions fans are also going to be looking at. Aaron Glenn versus Sean McVay. I've already talked about Aaron Glenn versus Stafford, but realistically it's going to come down to the coaches and how they approach one another. Much like Ben Johnson and Raheem Morris, now you're talking about Aaron Glenn and Sean McVay. Let's just be fair and honest here. Aaron Glenn has long been the embattled defensive coordinator of the Lions, and let's be fair and honest here. While some of the things that we're seeing on the defense are starting to improve now, such as the run defense has really gotten a lot better. We've started to see an uptick in sacks. We've seen an uptick in turnovers and all these other things. The problem is that while some of those improvements are really starting to come out, the defense has still yet to not come to full fruition with Aaron Glenn at the head of it. So it's like, listen, Aaron Glenn has got to do whatever he has to do to really make sure that this defense and his game planning, his play calling is on point. Because you have to take a look at the other side of this equation. McVay has long been considered one of the best offensive minds in the NFL. Probably the only one better or on the same equal footing is probably Shanahan. So it's like, listen, Aaron Glenn, who has had a hard time this year against some really good offenses, is going to have to do everything he possibly can. He's going to have to pull out all his bags of tricks, all of his best game planning stratagem. I was trying to put strategics in there, and that wasn't going to work. But the whole point is, Glenn is going to have to hone and perfect the craft that he has on this defense, or potentially provide a different look or wrinkle or two to throw off or try to confuse potentially McVay or Stafford, which, let's understand something here, that's going to be a difficult task to do, especially with the fact that McVay has probably seen a lot of what defensive coordinators can try to do, and Stafford has definitely seen almost everything that the NFL can throw at a quarterback during any particular given game. So, definitely a very tall task for Aaron Glenn, but it's definitely one that I'm very much going to be paying attention to, because it's going to be like, listen, are we going to see another game where, Aaron Glenn gets completely overwhelmed? Or are we going to see a game like we saw against the Cowboys, against the Broncos, where that defense, even though it might be getting, thrown all over on, it's really standing tall and it's really providing opposition opposite of the team that he's playing. So that's really something I want to see. And then there's the final matchup that I've talked about quite extensively over the course of this week. But again, the more I keep looking at it, the more it just continues to come to life for me. It's Goff versus Stafford. This is the only matchup where neither of these two guys are going to directly have any sort of impact on the other. They're not going to directly face each other. But you have to think about it. This matchup, in large part, in conjunction with the other ones I've already talked about, is going to decide, I think, the fate of this game. Because you have to think about this. Think about this really quickly. Take a look at these splits. And splits on the road or at home for either quarterback and how they've done in late games. Take a look at Stafford while he's been on the road this year in 2023. He's completed 154 completions to 241 attempts for 63.9 completion percentage rate. 1,924 yards, 11 touchdowns to 7 interceptions with a 91.7 passer rating. That's when he's been on the road. So again, not really bad, but again, not really good either. It's kind of just like above average. Then you take a look at Stafford in late games this year, which Stafford has only played in 2 late games this year, so he doesn't really have a whole lot in terms of what he's done in late time games. But what he does have is this: 42 completions, 67 attempts for 62.7 completion percentage rate, 597 yards, 3 touchdowns to 2 interceptions for a 93.9 passer rating. So again, not very good, but again, not very bad either. It's kind of like right there in the middle. Then you take a look at what Jared Goff has done while he's been at home and in late games. Everybody already knows the home stats, the home splits are going to look ridiculous, and they do. Take a look at Goff at home. 195 completions to 278 attempts for 70.1% completion rate, 2,240 yards, 19 touchdowns to 6 interceptions with a 107.9 passer rating. Jared Goff is ridiculous at home. He literally just finds a whole completely different gear when he's at home. And then you take a look at what Jared Goff has done in late games, some of which have been on the road. Because again, think about it. Kansas City, the Raiders game that I've just been talking about, the Packers game early on in the year. Again, there's been a lot of games where Jared Goff has been both at home and on the road in late time games. But take a look at what he's done. 110 completions to 168 attempts, 65.5 completion percentage rate, 1,284 yards, 9 touchdowns to 4 interceptions with a 96.4 passer rating. That's actually pretty good, especially considering the fact that those are primetime games. And like I said, that's taking into consideration being both on the road and at home. So it's like, listen, if you think about it, Goff has the edge because being at home, we're going to get the best version of him, and we're going to get the best version of this Lions offense overall. So the statistics also prove very well for Jared Goff, because it's like, listen, you have to think about it here. If the statistics are on Goff's side and the fact that he's home also is there, think about this. The motivational factor. Jared Goff and this Lions team is not going to have any shortage of motivation for this week. They're trying to win their first playoff game in 30 years. They're trying to extend themselves into the division round. Jared Goff is trying to prove to everybody, including his ex-head coach, that listen, you guys gave up on me too early. You guys did not do me any good. You guys actually disgraced me. So now I'm here to try and prove to everybody that yes, I am that good. You guys gave up too shortly on me. And it's like, listen, that's going to have, like I said, a huge boulder of a chip on his shoulder that he's going to be trying to prove. So it's like, listen, you look at the Rams on the other side, what's their motivation to win? That's it. They're just trying to win. They just have the simple motivation of just winning for the sake of winning. Because, hey, you want to win. It's the playoffs. The Lions have a lot more fuel, a lot more reasons to win that game rather than just the Rams. The only other motivation I think the Rams might have is just so that way Stafford can win his first return home game, or his first return game back to his home, his ex-home in Detroit. Other than that, I can't really think of one. But again, you take a look at all these matchups are going to be huge in determining how this game is won. And again, any one of these matchups could be the potential deciding factor. But like I said, for me, the two biggest ones, the freaking Lions secondary versus the Rams wide receivers and quarterback, and the quarterbacks themselves are going to be the biggest matchups that are going to decide this game. But we'll see what you guys all say. We'll see what you guys think about this. Potentially, there's other matchups I might have missed. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Just make it respectful. That's all I ask. And with that having been said, I just want to say thank you all for watching yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage you all to do one of these 3 things or all 3 of them. Like, comment, and subscribe. If by chance you subscribed in the past, you forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and now had a chance to do so, again, please subscribe. I highly encourage you to do it. But also, I highly encourage y'all that after you subscribe to the channel, please make sure you turn on that bell notification icon as well, so that way you guys never miss any more content. Again, subscription numbers are always going up, but we want to make sure we turn on that notification icon so that way you guys never miss any more content as soon as I push it out. To also help in that endeavor, please share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share it here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it anywhere and everywhere you can with everybody and anybody that you can. Again, the more we share it, the more the channel spreads, the more the channel grows, the better it does. And I'm thankful for every share as well as every subscription that I can get. And with that being said, I just want to again say thank you all for watching the content. Thank you all for everything that you do. If I gained you as a subscriber, welcome to the MCM family. If I still haven't gained you as a subscriber, hopefully you'll come back and I'll get another chance to do so. But until that time, I just want to say God bless to everybody. I hope y'all enjoyed the content and the show. And until the next time we meet, I'll see y'all in the next episode.